Today's stories may contain subject matter that some viewers may find sensitive, and as such, viewer discretion is always advised. Also, if you have a story you want to send my way, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to submit your story. And thank you. This happened to me and my friend when we were around 16. We would always hang out or stay at each other's houses, to the point that my parents joked about making up my big brother's old room as her own. It was just me and my parents since my older brother had moved out, so we tended to hang out there more, but we did stay at her place quite a bit too. The only problem was that she didn't get along with her mom very well, so when she would come home from work and be in a bad mood, or when she just wanted to get away from her, we would walk around the neighborhood or head over to the park that was over a few blocks. It was pretty old. The playground was all metal and rusted with paint chipping away. Thinking back, I'm surprised we never got cut on any of it. Thank God for tetanus shots, though. Am I right? Anyways, the playground was pretty normal with the part you can walk up or climb up, a few slides, and the bars you can swing across. There was also the swing set that had 2 normal swings and one of those baby seat swings, and then the merry-go-round that was wobbly and squeaked. It was perfect for 2 teenagers to just get away, especially since people didn't dare take their little kids there anymore. We liked to do stupid things on the swings, or just lay on our backs on the merry-go-round while we talked. It was nice and peaceful, and it gave us a sense of privacy that we needed. I also wanted to mention another place that we would go when we weren't going to the park. Typically, when we didn't want to walk that far, or if it was too hot or too cold, and that was her neighbor's house. Or rather, the guy that was about 2 houses down. We'll call him Jack. Jack was a middle-aged, quiet guy that lived alone with his dog. He kept to himself as far as I could tell, but was always very nice to us. He let my friend and I watch his dog and house sit when he was going to be gone for a few days, and he always said we were welcomed to anything in his home. Food, soda, watching movies, or things like that. It was really cool because he had a snow cone maker, so when we wanted to go somewhere that her mom wouldn't be able to find us, we would go over there, make snow cones, and watch TV. He even invited us over when we were walking by, and he offered us stuff. I remember one time we were walking, and he had just gotten home. He waved us over to help him bring some things inside, to which we helped, and then he showed us that he had just bought a SNES. So he asked if we wanted to play, and we went in and played some games, and he actually ordered pizza for us. It was a lot of fun, and I imagined we were like adults with a roommate, just chilling. Jack was actually cool, too. He never gave off any weird vibes, and actually seemed to keep his distance, too, which was appreciated. We talked to him like we were friends, telling him how school was going, gossip that we knew, people we liked, and those that we couldn't stand. So, those were our 2 getaway spots that we took advantage of often. One weekend, we wanted to stay the night together, but she wasn't allowed to go to anyone's house, so I had to stay over at her place. No big deal. I gathered my necessities and my mom dropped me off over there. We chilled for a while in her brother's room while he played games, but when he left to go to his girlfriend's house, he would lock the door and wouldn't let us in there. So we went back to her room and just listened to music while we were drawing. It wasn't long after that, though, that her mom got home from work and immediately ruined the mood. She was just flat out mean to Anna. It was usually just yelling at her, but every once in a while, I would see her smack her in the mouth or grab her by the hair to take her into the kitchen or something to do something. I know it was stupid, looking back on it now, but I never told my parents. I mentioned that she was mean, like when she yelled at her, but I never mentioned her ever being physically abusive to her. Part of that was because Anna asked me not to tell anyone either. What I didn't understand, though, was that she was never like that to her brother. She was always kind to him and gave him anything he asked for. He seemed like he understood and felt bad for the situation, too, which is why he always asked us if we wanted to hang out in his room while he was there, but still never let us in when he wasn't home. Anyways, we knew she was home because she had slammed the door shut. Shortly after, she hollered for Anna to help her with something. I sat in the room waiting for her to come back, and when she did, she looked pretty annoyed. She told me that she wanted her to do something and was complaining about it, so I volunteered to help to get it done quicker. I don't remember what it was exactly, but it was something pretty stupid and mundane, like she wanted her to clean the windows or something like that. When she was mad, she always gave some random chore to do, and as she did it, she would nag and make comments about how she was always doing it wrong. So after we got started and she got started on her nagging, Anna got mad and told her that she was done. They started arguing a bit, and when she went in to smack her, she managed to duck to get out of the way, so her mom yelled at us to leave. We couldn't go to my house, but yet she still wanted us out. So we grabbed a few things like our little speaker and MP3 player and a flashlight and walked out. It was starting to get dark, so we decided to walk down to the park for a few hours to cool off. We got there, and we swung for a bit. Anna cried and practically cursed her mom for a few, and then we got back into high spirits talking about other things. Thankfully, it wasn't long before we were goofing off on the merry-go-round and laughing again. As mentioned, it was uncommon for us to run into other people there, especially at night. So when we saw a car pull up and just sit there for a while, we were suspicious. Anna thought it was probably someone that had called the cops since we were being loud, so we started getting up and gathering our stuff when we heard someone get out of the car and heard a familiar voice. As he approached, we noticed that it was Jack. He greeted us, and we did the same, immediately feeling at ease again. He sat next to us and asked us what we were doing out here. Anna said we were just chilling, waiting for her mom to leave or to go back to bed to go back home. As we talked for a while with him, joking around, something was brought up about a guy that I liked. When that was mentioned, Jack made a pouty face and said something about, don't tell me you have your eyes set on someone else now." We both chuckled, and Anna mentioned the guy a little more, and Jack seemed like he was trying to one-up everything that she said. She mentioned that he had longer hair, and Jack said, "I'd grow mine out for you." She said he had his permit, and then he said, "I already have my own car." Things like that. Then she mentioned that he had his lip pierced, and Jack said, "I have a piercing too." We both had spent enough time around him to know that he did not. So, being the naive girls that we were, we both kind of started giggling and said, "No, you don't." And he said, "Of course I do. You girls just can't see it from where you are." Again, not thinking much of it, Anna asked where. He then got this grin that actually made me feel uncomfortable and said, "Well, I'd have to take my pants off." And then he winked at us. I could tell Anna was a bit uncomfortable too, but she just kind of laughed and said, "Ew, no thanks." He then laughed, and as we sat there awkwardly silent for a few moments, He finally broke the silence, saying, "You know, I always thought you girls were too cute for your age, like dangerously so." This grown man really just said this to us. We just sat there not knowing what to say or how to react. Thankfully, he stood up and said, I should get going, but if we wanted to come back to his place for some fun, we were always welcome, and then headed back to his car. Once we heard the car door shut, I turned to Anna and asked what the hell that was. Jack was never like that before, and now I didn't think I would ever feel comfortable around him. We sat there for a while waiting for him to leave as we were nervous to even walk past him. It was probably 15 minutes or so, and he was still sitting there, lights off, so we decided to leave and made a plan in case he tried anything else. Unfortunately, the park was fenced in, so there was only one way to really enter and exit, unless you wanted to climb the fence. And we weren't trying to make it look obvious that we were avoiding him. So, as we started walking by the parking lot, we walked along the edge and looked over to see him staring right at us. He didn't move, he didn't smile or wave, he just stared. We finally got out of there and headed right back to her place. Thankfully, her mom was already passed out, so we snuck back into her room and, again, tried to relax and talk about what the hell had just happened. Unfortunately, that would not be the end of it, though. It was either the next day or the day after, while I was over at her place, Anna's mom had come into the room yelling about Jack and how we weren't allowed to go over there anymore. At that point, we had no intentions of ever talking to him again, but we were curious and asked why. She said someone had called the cops due to suspicious people in the park screaming, and they saw a car there for several hours with their lights off. When the cops showed up, they found Jack in his car, pants down, with a picture of us that Anna had given him some time ago. It was one of the pictures that we took for our yearbook. She yelled at us saying that was stupid of us, and that we weren't allowed to even go to the park alone either. I did tell my parents too, which led to us having to explain why we even went there at night alone in the first place. They already knew about Jack as well, and had even met him and didn't really think much of it. They also agreed though, and they didn't want us there alone anymore, thinking nothing good was going to come from it anyways, which we didn't hesitate. Anna wanted to be here more anyways. We never saw Jack again after that, but we did learn when we were older by looking him up that he had gone to jail a few times for similar crimes, so we unfortunately weren't the only ones targeted. Last I checked though, he was locked up for a few years, so I hope that we, nor any other girl, has to ever run into that creep again. I was a park ranger for many years at a local park in my town. It was a decent sized, with plenty to offer. It had 2 different playground areas for the smaller kids. There was a decent-sized walking and biking path that went back into the trees and circled around the entire park, and it also had a back entrance that split off to follow along the road. In the back, in the trees, there was also a secluded gazebo area that people had parties at too. Then, there was a small water park and skate park on the other side of the path. There always seemed to be something going on there, year-round, which I didn't mind. I loved being outside, and I loved my job, so I loved just patrolling the area or helping out when someone called us for something. However, it wasn't always a happy job. I also got sent to check on or clean up some bad situations. Most of the time, it was people being disruptive, like drinking and being loud or inconsiderate to others. People trashing an area, like at the gazebo in the back, and then leaving their mess, breaking up fights, things like that. But there were a few situations that stuck with me that I never really got answers for. This was one of the weirdest ones for me. So, back by the gazebo was an open, grassy area that we tended to have school or scouts camping in. And there was a place where you could barbecue, but they usually got permits to do a campfire. I assume to learn how to start fires and stuff like that. When we had groups like this, we typically had one ranger staying overnight in the area to make sure that everyone was safe, and also not doing things they weren't supposed to. I'd done this a few times, and I loved it, because I got to hang out in the park all night, sleep under the stars, and typically got free food. So I was going to be staying one night since a group of Girl Scouts, or something of that sort, was going to be there. I, of course, drove there, but then all I had with me for the night was my backpack that had some of the things I would take with me when I was camping. My ID stuff to prove I was a park ranger, and a fold-up cot that I had. I liked to literally sleep under the stars. No tent, no canopy, just me and a cot, and it was perfect. So, I did my rounds and answered questions that any of the adults had, helped lead them to the restrooms, and then they all got ready for bed and headed to their tents. I did another round just to make sure that everyone else was gone and that nothing was wrong, and then I went and laid on my cot. It usually takes a while for me to fall asleep though, so I laid there for a while, reading, before I finally started to get drowsy. As I went to put my book back into my bag and turn off my headlamp, I heard crunching like someone was walking. I immediately looked around to see if anyone was getting out of their tent, and I didn't see anyone. I turned my lamp back on and started to look over at the tents again, but again I didn't see anyone getting out or any movements coming from them. So I started looking around the trees to see if there was someone around that shouldn't be, or possibly even wildlife. We did have the occasional deers or raccoons that may go through, so I was thinking that probably is what it was. But then, my eyes met with something standing in the trees. There's a pretty thick area of trees that separates the front of the park from the back, so it would be weird for anyone to be walking through them. Not to mention, when I did my walk around, there was no sign of anyone around, and not even any extra cars in the parking lot. There was no reason for people to be here as we were long closed, so I just sat and watched for a moment to see what they would do. They had to know that I was staring at them, with my light facing right at them, but still they didn't budge. As I watched this guy, though, my eyes started to focus more in the dark, and I realized a couple of things. One, this guy was huge. I was comparing him to the trees, and his height was daunting. He had to be 7 or 8 feet tall, but maybe it was just because I was tired. But other than just looking freakishly tall, I thought he was wearing a big fur coat. He just looked very furry. The problem I had with this, though, is that it was around August, I believe, so it was way too hot to be wearing a fur coat. I didn't want to alarm any of the kids, so I stood up and thought I would walk over there to see if they were okay, and then ask them to leave if so. As I stood up, the guy backed up slowly and started walking away. That's when I noticed that it wasn't a coat. This guy, or thing, was covered in fur. His legs, arms, everywhere. I started getting closer to the trees when this thing just took off in the opposite direction, but on all fours. He was standing and walking on 2 legs, but then when he ran off on all fours, it seemed so fluid, like an animal, not a human. I'm not going to lie, though. I was not brave enough to follow this thing, but was also not wanting to wake up the campers. I didn't want to scare the kids and look like this psycho, so I walked along the outside of the trees, scared this thing was going to jump out at me, but I didn't see it again. I called out to someone that was on call, and I asked if they knew of anything going on or anyone that was supposed to be here, and he said no. I told them that I saw something in the trees, and he immediately just dismissed it as a deer or something. So I tried to snap out of it and headed back to my cot and laid there. Unfortunately, at that point, though, every little sound would catch my attention. When the wind blew and moved a branch, I would look over at it. I would look around if I heard a car driving by. Anytime the girls shifted in the tents, I would jump up. So, needless to say, I didn't sleep very well that night. Thankfully, the girls were young enough that they woke up pretty early, so I wasn't alone anymore. Some of the adults noticed that I looked off and asked if I was okay, and I just said that I didn't sleep well, and I didn't mention anything else about it. I did tell my friend that worked there too about what had happened and what I saw, and of course he was adamant that I had seen Bigfoot. I live in a state that's known for its sightings, and that's all I'll say about my location, but I never believed in that stuff before. Now I'm not quite sure. I don't know how else I could explain what I saw, though. Either way, I never saw it again while I worked there, thankfully. But you can bet that I was better prepared for future overnight stays. Back when my daughter was still quite little, we used to go to a nearby park to play. I was a stay-at-home mom, and she was my first and only kid. My husband's also in the military, so we tended to move around a lot. Because of this, I don't get to interact with other adults very often, and with my daughter just starting a new school, it was a great way for us to get some interactions from other parents and kids. So, since she had half days on Fridays, I would pick her up from school, run some errands, if I had any, and then head to the park for a few hours. Charlie was always an outgoing child. When we went to places like the park, she was always quick to meet friends. She would run up to others, introduce herself, and start playing with them. If she noticed someone playing alone, she would immediately go to them and share whatever toy that she had brought with her, so that they were not alone. I had to talk to her about making sure that we don't share too much information, because she can also get pretty carried away. For her age, though, she was also pretty smart and aware of her surroundings, but I blame her father for that. Anyways, this is all what caused the situation we ran across one day at the park with another little kid there. We went over to this park as we normally did, and after looking it over, Charlie told me that she was headed to the swings, and she ran off a bit ahead of me. I caught up and I pushed her for a while and was playing with her and talking about her day at school. While standing there, I was looking around the park as you do to see who all is around, what's going on nearby, things like that. I noticed a middle-aged woman walking to the park with a young girl, probably close to my daughter's age. I remembered them because the mom looked like she had a firm grip on the girl's hand, whereas the little girl looked a bit nervous, like she may have been shy. And they stopped by the entrance of the actual playground area when the mom knelt down and said something to the girl. She looked very serious about it too, but again, my thought was maybe just laying out some ground rules, stay in my sight, no wandering off with strangers, etc. Then, the mom sat down at a picnic table and the girl slowly walked off to the actual playground. I turned my focus back to Charlie, as she started talking, saying she was going to try the monkey bars, and hopped off the swing. I noticed the little girl had gone over the bridge on the other side of the monkey bars and just stood there watching us. I smiled at her as she gave a shy smile back and then looked towards her mom. I noticed at this point the mom was sitting facing the playground, but was nose deep into a newspaper, circling and writing things on it and making phone calls. I helped Charlie across the bars, and when she got to the other side, she did as I anticipated, excusing herself to not kick this girl, and then asking her if she was going to go across. She shook her head no, and then Charlie began her barrage of questions. Do you like monkey bars? Have you tried them before? Are you afraid of them? The girl shyly answered that she didn't know how to do it, to which Charlie volunteered me to help since I was so good at it. I then agreed, looking back over at her mom and seeing her still preoccupied. I offered to take her across, and she agreed. I got her set up on the first one, and then helped her across to the other side. Once there, Charlie clapped and told her that she did a great job, which made the girl smile. So after taking them both across a few times, Charlie introduced herself and asked the girl what her name was. After a few seconds of looking around, she told us that it was Carrie. So, from there, the two of them played together for a while. I decided to sit at a different bench for a while. The picnic table that she was at was to my right, so I would gaze over to see the mom either still on the phone or writing something, or she would glance up and look around for Carrie and then continue on with what she was doing. After a few, I saw the two of them sitting in the middle of the merry-go-round and talking. Charlie had quite a confused or puzzled look on her face, so I assumed they were just telling each other stories or something. A little while after, they both came up to me and Charlie asked for her snack and then asked if she could share some with Carrie. I agreed, and as I started pulling it out, Charlie said she had to run to the restroom, so I reminded her where it was and watched as she walked over to the facilities. Once she went in, I finished pulling out the crackers and water when Carrie said that I was a really nice mom. I smiled, and I thanked her and told her that she was a really nice kid. And I said that, I bet your mom is pretty nice too, huh? As I tilted my head to the side, she looked over to her mom and her smile seemed to change. Like it was fake. And she said, yeah, my real mom is. This, of course, caught me off guard at first, but then I thought maybe that was just her stepmom or another guardian that was watching her. So I just chuckled a bit and began pouring some of the crackers out for her. As I did this, she then said, my name's not really Carrie. Not really knowing how to respond to that, I just said oh yeah? And almost as if she was whispering to me, she said, my real name is Sabrina. So I said something like, well, nice to meet you, Sabrina, and started asking her why she had a fake name when Charlie came running back over to us as well. That's when she told me it was the name that she gave her and pointed to the woman on the bench. Charlie started eating and was just listening to us when she cut in to say, Carrie just moved here and asked if she could come over to watch some movies and have a new friend. Normally I was all for her making new friends and getting contact info from parents, but the look in Sabrina's eyes was different from a kid begging please. It was more of a plea for help. I asked her if she was okay, and she said she didn't want to go back home with her. This immediately put me in defense mode. I had Charlie sitting next to me and eating, while I looked at the girl straight in the face and I said, do you know that woman that brought you here? I remember she looked so scared and then glanced over at her, and then back to me, and she said, I don't know. I tried explaining to her that she wasn't in any trouble, and that she wouldn't be. anything I could to keep her calm and get more information out of her, and then I heard someone shout for Carrie. She looked up and started walking over to that woman, so I tried to act calm and uncaring. I turned to look at Charlie and smiled, talking to her as I tried glancing back up at Sabrina. I noticed the woman was now shaking her arm really hard, and she looked like she was about to cry. I wasn't the only person to notice this, though. I saw a couple of adults looking in that direction at them too, so I decided to take a chance and calm the situation some. I told Charlie to stay put, and I walked over to Sabrina and the woman. I introduced myself, and I said my daughter was very outgoing and that she had immediately invited her over for snacks, and apologized profusely that I didn't ask her first, worried about possible allergies. I even made sure to refer to her as Carrie. The woman seemed to let go of her and immediately began rubbing her arm and softened her tone. She said it was no problem and she was just worried about where she was, since she wasn't in the last place that she saw her. I paused for a second, not knowing what to do next, when Sabrina asked if she could play a bit longer. The woman then agreed, and as she said a few more things to her, I started walking back to Charlie. And that's when she said to me, "Sabrina's scared, Mommy." I couldn't risk it. Having my own daughter there and thinking what I would do if anything happened to her, I called the cops. The girl went back and continued to play, so I called them while they weren't around. And they stayed on the phone until they said someone had showed up at the park, and I called the girls back over. I told them to stay by me no matter who came up to the bench. To my surprise, though, as I stood up and turned around to see the cop, I noticed that the woman at the table was gone. Even her newspaper or whatever, she was just gone. I gave my report to the officer, and we actually had a few other adults that came over and asked if it was about the girl too, because they had more to add as well. It turned out, the little girl's name really was Sabrina. She was abducted by this woman and was told to use the name Carrie in hopes that they wouldn't be found. Sabrina talked to the cop, and they ended up taking her with them, even though she cried asking to stay with us. I told her she was safe and that they would help find her real mom. I learned, however, that the woman was someone that they actually did know, her parents. I don't know if she was a family member or just a friend, but they took her when they weren't aware, and they had actually left the state. They weren't even from the state that we were in. She was reunited with her real parents, of course. I didn't really hear much else about it. Sometimes I do want to look her up to see how she's doing, or how her parents are doing. I'm just incredibly thankful that day that my daughter was so outgoing and willing to reach out to others that she trusted me and Charlie enough to tell us. It scares me to think about what could have happened if I didn't catch on, or if she didn't speak up. Kids can be smarter than you think, so keep an open mind and don't pass off some of the weird things that they say as just some strange kid talk. So this was a collection of creepy park stories. Creepy stories that take place in, around, nope, not around, just in a park or parks, not just one park. These all didn't happen in the same park, I don't think. That'd be kind of crazy, wouldn't it? I don't think that's what happened. Anyways, hopefully you all enjoyed this collection of stories. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button and leave me a subscription if you're new. That's right, a subscription. That's a different way of saying subscribe to the channel. You can also leave me a comment letting me know what your thoughts were on the video or the stories. Always appreciated. And I forgot to say thank you. So thank you to everyone who listens and anyone who sends me their stories, as well as those on Reddit who allow me to use their stories. I'm very grateful. And very confused on why my outro isn't going normal. My flow here is kind of off, isn't it? Anyways, I hope you all have a great day. I hope I'll see you on the next video. I'm tired, my throat's scratchy, and I have other stuff I really need to get done, so I love you all. Stay safe out there. Wear your seatbelts. Don't eat oranges that you find on the ground in the middle of the road. That's not healthy. And until I see you again, I hope that you, rest good. Or even, sleep well.